power is building as Iranian combat power declines.
As the U.S. insists it can continue at the current pace indefinitely, some here fear the next step might be American boots on the ground. But President Trump's suggestion that the war would be wrapped up within weeks suggests the U.S. is content bombing Iranians from the air. The U.S. contention that American warfare will be overwhelming and short confronts an old military saying: no battle plan survives contact with the enemy unscathed. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Stay in Washington, D.C., but live. Ros and Jordan are standing by for us. And Ros, if you start to count up the cost of all this, you need to do it in the billions, don't you? Is that going to be a problem for the Trump administration down the line?
Well, it's going to raise questions on Capitol Hill, where legislators have been grappling with the size of the federal debt and with trying to make certain that the interest on the federal debt can be paid. And also, they are just approved a $750 billion, so one-year budget for the Pentagon. So the notion that the White House is about to ask for $50 billion just to replace the Patriot and Tomahawk missiles, as well as replenish the THAAD missile defense system, just in the first 7 days, $50 billion, that may well raise questions among legislators, both Republican and Democratic on the Hill. This is something that possibly could have been discussed if Congress had been properly consulted under the terms of the U.S. Constitution about just how much this war on Iran was going to cost. But considering that there's still a government shutdown when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security, this is going to raise some political issues for the White House.
Ros Jordan there in Washington, D.C. Well, as U.S. in Israel pound cities and towns across Iran, Tehran is retaliating, as we've been hearing, with its own missile and drone attacks in the region and indeed beyond. Al Jazeera's defense editor, Alex Katopoulos, looks now at the Patriot air defense system that countries are using to defend themselves.
This long-range conflict is being fought with aircraft, missiles and drones. Iran's huge inventory of missiles has been the target of US and Israeli airstrikes as launchers, launch sites and component factories are systematically targeted and destroyed. Israeli estimates of Iran's missile stocks before the war sat at around 2,500. Its inventory of armed drones, cheaper and easy to make, is much larger and in the tens of thousands. The main weapon Gulf nations, Israel and the US, are using to stop Iran's missiles is the Patriot air defense system. Its advanced PAC-3 interceptors, moving at speeds in excess of 6,000 kilometers per hour, can detect and hit incoming missiles from up to 160 kilometers away. But they're expensive, at $4.5 million per interceptor, and usually 2 or 3 are fired for every incoming missile. The Patriot interceptors are accurate and advanced, but they take a long time to make. Last year, Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer, made a total of 620, and these have to be divvied up between Ukraine, NATO allies, Japan, Taiwan, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, as well as to protect the US bases in the region.
Let's take this on with Andreas Krieg, who's an associate professor at the School of Security Studies, King's College London, joins us from London. Andreas, thanks for joining us here. Interesting hearing about those the constituent parts of the weapons that different countries have. But what about the resources, the stocks of those, and how long they may last? I mean, how long can Iran keep firing missiles into Israel, into the Gulf, and how long can the Gulf defend itself? How long indeed can Israel fire and defend itself with the stocks that they currently have? And that, because how long all these missiles last and all the stocks of weapons last has a fundamental impact on how long the war is going to last.
No, I mean, we have to differentiate between the different types of weapons that are being used by the Iranians. So their ballistic missiles are limited in terms of they're depleting their stockpiles, and they won't be able to replenish them as quickly as, for example, their stockpiles of drones. But they have thousands and thousands of drones, very cheaply made, and they can continue producing them. And also there is a different sort of set of objectives here. So if you're striking Israel, you're trying to inflict pain, you're using your ballistic missiles. We see the rate of firing to go down, but they're also using more sophisticated technology to target Israeli targets. In the Gulf, the situation is slightly different because in the Gulf, they don't necessarily want to inflict pain through these warheads. What they're trying to do is trying to disrupt the flow of trade, trying to disrupt the freedom of navigation, trying to disrupt aviation and basically, free movement through airspace. All of that can be achieved with very little. You don't need to use ballistic missiles. You can use a drone a day to disrupt the airspace and basically thereby putting pressure on the Gulf states trying to intercept them. And yes, at the moment, the stockpiles obviously are winding down, but the UAE and Qatar in particular do have quite a significant stockpile. This is also true for Saudi Arabia. But if the rate at which we've seen these interceptors being used over the last couple of days, particularly the first 4 days of this conflict, at that rate, obviously the Gulf states couldn't sustain it for weeks. But if we're seeing now these attacks winding down, they could potentially sustain it for quite some time. But I do think time is on Iran's side, and all they need to do is disrupt from time to time, and thereby kind of paralyzing the Gulf.
What do you make of the Iranian strategy of targeting Gulf countries, neighboring countries, in the way that it has? And do you think the Trump administration made that calculation that it would go as far as it has?
Absolutely not. There's no way that the Trump administration had a plan or a strategy. It's quite clear they don't. We've seen probably 4 or 5 different plans being communicated to the press from Washington over the last couple of days with different timelines, different objectives. It seems like it's a bit of an improv military operation where they're trying to improvise and see what comes next. So there's absolutely no plan. They certainly didn't plan for the Iranians to escalate in the way they did, although everyone in the Gulf, everyone who's done Gulf security, anybody who's ever done any war game on the Gulf has planned for this worst case scenario. And this is the scenario that we're seeing now with the Strait of Hormuz practically closed, with attacks on energy and critical national infrastructure, attacks on ports and airports. That is something, kind of what the Iranians are trying to do is hit the center of gravity and the livelihood of these Gulf states. That was to be expected. It's going all out. It's certainly inflicting pain and massive disruption, not just for the Gulf states, because we're now seeing how relevant the Gulf states are for the global economy, but it really disrupts GDP potentially down the line with energy prices going up. That will have ripple effects across the world. There's no one in the world who will not be affected by this war. And with every day that this continues, this is an attack by Iran on the global economy to put pressure on the world and on different states to put pressure on Trump to say this has to stop.
Much has been made in the United States, at least, and certainly in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu, of regime change. What about the potential for that being affected by the United States in Israel without boots on the ground?
This has never been done in history without boots on the ground. Regime change has never been achieved from the air with standoff munitions. At the moment, the US does not have boots on the ground, even if they're now trying to arm the Kurds and are thinking about going into Balochistan. These are extremely, extremely reckless attempts to trying to build a surrogate force on the ground that will never be able to take Tehran, but it will be able to disrupt. And that sort of disruption can spill over into neighboring countries, and it certainly will. So it's really playing with fire. It's reckless. It's certainly not strategic in any way. And what you would require is considerable boots on the ground, not a few special forces here and there. What you would need are hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground to make this actually an operation that can be achieved. I cannot see, and we've been proven wrong by Trump now this time around, but I cannot see how the US has the stomach to kind of put boots on the ground in an Iraq 2.0 sort of operation. I cannot see that happening. There is absolutely no majority for this in the America First movement. There's no majority within the Republicans. There's no majority within the American public. And it would be an escalation and it could still not succeed. So I think that is a red line. I cannot see for the Americans to do that.
Appreciate your analysis, Andreas. Thanks very much. That's Andreas Krieg joining us there from London. So it is just past 10:30 GMT. You're watching Al Jazeera's extended coverage of the conflict between the United States, Israel and Iran. I'm Nick Clark.
Oh.
More than 1,300 Iranians have been killed since the conflict began. Thousands more are injured. The Israeli army says its operation against Iran is moving to the next phase to further dismantle, quote, the regime and its military capabilities. Iran has launched another barrage of missiles at Israel. These are the latest pictures of interceptions above Tel Aviv. Overnight explosions there caused significant damage with debris scattered across the city. At least 11 people have been killed in Israel since Saturday. In Lebanon, the Israeli military has launched intense air attacks across the country, including in the capital, Beirut. On Thursday, it issued an unprecedented forced evacuation order for all residents in that area, including Daya, which is home to hundreds of thousands of people. The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah has been escalating since the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. Excuse me. Now, the UK has arrested 4 men accused of spying for Iran. One of the men has an Iranian citizenship and 3 others are dual Iranian-British nationals. London's Metropolitan Police says the suspects were surveilling Jewish sites and individuals. Let's join Camille Nedelec, who's in London. Camille, tell us more.
So there were a further 6 men arrested, and that was under suspicion of aiding a suspect. There are police searches ongoing at a number of properties in and around London, and this was part of a pre-planned long-term operation. So this isn't a direct response to those strikes that we saw led by the US and Israel on Saturday, or to the resulting escalation in the Middle East. But what it does speak to is a renewed sense of urgency in the UK to ensure that that worsening conflict doesn't then translate into domestic threats. And that's essentially something that the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer touched upon in his speech on Thursday, in which he said the UK government was reaching out to Muslim and Jewish places of worship to ensure that they do have appropriate security in place. And even in the wake of those strikes on Saturday, just a few hours later, the German anti-Semitism commissioner warned that he expected to see an uptick in attacks on Jewish life. And these strikes that were spearheaded by the US and Israel were, in the words of the White House, designed to make the West, including Europe and Britain, safer.
Camille, what's the UK's government position on the conflict as far as we know it?
So the UK's government position, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he was saying that the special relationship between the UK and the US is still very much in operation. And that's off the back of criticism from Trump that the UK wasn't doing its bit. Trump notoriously saying that Starmer is no Winston Churchill, but in an unusual veiled criticism of Trump, Starmer said that the UK would be making decisions, it would stand by its values and not be pressured to do anything that wouldn't be in accordance to that. So essentially, Starmer stands by the UK's initial decision not to take part in the original strikes, but then the equation changed. When Iran started attacking other British allies, Britain is now, in the words of Keir Starmer, in more of a defence posturing. So there were British jets in the sky in the following hours on Saturday, and then again on Wednesday in Qatari airspace. And that's obviously likely to continue as there'll be 4 additional Typhoon jets sent to Qatar. There's another point on which the 2 leaders don't see eye to eye, and that's exactly how long this conflict is expected to last for. The US President Donald Trump has said that the operation is going ahead of schedule, and that couldn't be further from Keir Starmer's perspective. He was saying that the British public need to be ready for a conflict that could last for some time.
Camille Nedelec there in London, thank you. Well, at least 2 people have been injured in northern Iraq after an Iranian strike hit a camp housing Kurdish fighters. Fighters are part of a 6-party alliance of Kurdish parties. Iran's military has stepped up its attacks on Kurdish armed groups in Iraq. US President Donald Trump has encouraged Kurdish fighters in Iran to take up arms against the government. Asad Beg went into the community hit in the outskirts of Erbil in northern Iraq and explains how Kurdish fighters in the region could play a role in the conflict.
They are an important part of this larger picture, more so now, since we've heard voices, and including the President of the United States, Donald Trump, talking about how he'd like for Kurds within Iran to take up arms. and also leaked reports about CIA supporting groups and wanting them to mount a ground operation. Now, this particular group on the outskirts of Erbil, the Hubat organization of Iranian Kurdistan, they were hit last night, 2 drone strikes last night, injuring 2 people. Now, they were caught completely off guard from what we can tell. And if I can just show you some of the damage now behind me, you can see the impact of the drone. This area, it's not a particularly large camp, but what it is, and they won't tell us how many members they actually have, but they say that they are willing to mount a ground operation. They've always been willing since 47 years, but they're waiting for the right opportunity. And you can see even here some of the remnants of the drone. Now, speaking to some of the fighters here, they believe the drone wasn't launched from Iran. They believe groups aligned to Iran, based in Iraq, launched those drones. Now, one of these fighters has just returned. You can see his head bandaged. He was one of those that were injured. But at the time of this attack, again, caught completely off guard, the room behind me, they were cooking, and some of that food is still out there in the pots. Now, speaking to the fighters here, they say they've had no contact with the Americans, no contact with the CIA, no contact with Israel or Mossad. They've had no support from them. But what they are saying is that they are willing to mount ground operations. But the politicians in northern Iraq are painting a different picture. Now, the president, Najrivan Barzani, has said that Iraqi Kurdistan will not be a part of any conflict or military escalation.
So it has been a week since the assassination of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. His funeral yet to be held, and a new Supreme Leader yet to be chosen. So let's take a closer look at this crucial role. Under the Constitution, the Supreme Leader is head of state and commander-in-chief. He controls the armed forces, appoints the head of judiciary, selects members of oversight bodies, and confirms the president. He's not directly elected by the public, and he's chosen by this assembly of experts, which are 88 clerics elected by the public every 8 years. Candidates must first be approved by the Guardian Council. If the Supreme Leader dies, which is the case now, or becomes incapacitated, the Assembly of Experts must select a successor. The decision is made in a closed-door session. There's no public vote on it. Until a new Supreme Leader is appointed, interim arrangements manage authority. Iran's constitution is designed to ensure a swift transfer of power and prevent a vacuum at the top. Okay, let's explore this further with Luciano Zakharov, who's an Iran and Gulf analyst, joins us here in the studio. Luciano, great to have you back. I mean, there's much that's been made of no new Supreme Leader has been announced, but perhaps he's already been selected and not announced because Israel has said as soon as they do, they'll target them.
Exactly. I mean, 3 days ago, they targeted the Assembly of Experts building when they were announcing that the next meeting would take place. But of course, we all assume that they wouldn't be so naive of gathering together, informing everybody when they're going to meet to decide the leader. We have to bear in mind that the only one that this process took place, which was in 1989, when Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, died. It took only 3 days to choose him. On the 6th of June, he died. On the 9th of June, he was already a leader. And it was a meeting, 2 meetings at the end of the day in which they made the decision. Then it was a record of that. And then later on, the record of this meeting that was broadcast everywhere, was leaked. So we know how the process was. So most probably this already took place in a different place, in a different setting, because the Islamic Republic cannot continue this way without a leader for many days, because they need a religious and legal justification for the acts of their
so he could well be in place and already orchestrating what's going on. Donald Trump, what do you make of this? Donald Trump says he wants to be involved in choosing Iran's next Supreme Leader.
Well, he already is the interim president of Venezuela, as far as we remember. He said that as well. So maybe he wants to be part of, he wants to be the new leader. I mean, I'm not surprised about this thing, because he keeps saying that the other day when he was meeting with the German chancellor, he was saying, oh, I hope the next one is not going to be as bad as the new one, so he wants to be involved. But of course, Iran will not going to choose someone to please Trump. Most probably they will choose someone that dislike Trump. There is no way that this process will end with someone that the first thing he would do is to say, oh, yeah, we were going to make a peace with the United States. This is not on the map. This is not on the roadmap.
Right. What's your overview, Luciano, of the current situation with all the ongoing attacks into Iran and Iran firing out against Gulf countries like here in Qatar and elsewhere, and indeed the back and forth between Iran and Israel?
Well, I think that Iran is playing a very dangerous game. We said since the very beginning, once you enter in this game, miscalculation can happen, and actually they are happening. The problem is if all this was already miscalculated from the very beginning, because Iran was expecting that in a few days it will be able to do what they are actually doing, but the result would be much more favorable to Iran. I think it's not. It is true that this Iran, with the involvement of all the other countries closing the Strait of Hormuz, etc., is having a global impact. But this shows that it's not enough to push the United States to stop. So Iran is now running out of time and running out of guns, weapons. So burning all the bridges without a short-term outcome that would be beneficial for Iran. Beneficial here, we don't mean winning the war. This is a war that Iran cannot win.
Right.
It's only
making
a war.
It last.
Exactly. I mean, it's to reduce the cost of losing this war, or to remain in a situation that they can still discuss something, ceasefire with the United States. We are not talking about now discussions about the nuclear issue. This is out of the picture again. Is to reach a ceasefire that can save face to the regime, which is at the end what Trump wants. Trump wants to negotiate something.
As we're chatting, Luciano, we're looking at pictures of the southern suburbs of Beirut, a great pall of smoke above there as Israel continues to assault the Beirut capital and indeed across the country in the south too. What do you make about that expansion of this conflict?
I think it's still going to be very limited. So far, we don't see more than Hezbollah that is engaging in this war. No other group. I mean, the Houthis, everybody's surprised about the Houthis, how quiet they are. Maybe it could be something strategic, or maybe since the Houthis are much more independent than any other group allied to Iran, they don't want to engage in this because they know that it's not going to end very well. So I don't see that this is going to represent the big expansion of the war as far as we are concerned. More states getting involved with the retaliation, or entering into a war against one side or against the other.
Certainly having a huge impact in Lebanon itself and across the borders. Luciano, thanks for that. Luciano,
thank you very much.
Well, Donald Trump is due to meet executives from the biggest U.S. defense contractors at the White House on Friday. They're expected to discuss increasing weapons production. The Pentagon is trying to replenish supplies after these strikes on Iran and several other locations. Lucia Newman has this now from Washington, D.C.
At one of the Pentagon's favorite arms factories in Arkansas, an unusual visit from the Secretary of War, where 1,500 workers were given a pep talk.
You are the patriots, ensuring that our warriors are never, ever in a fair fight. The warfighters need you to build, and they need it yesterday.
The White House has fast-tracked a $50 billion arms budget in Congress. And the Pentagon plans to buy 57 Tomahawk long-range guided missiles this year. But that's not enough. The U.S. and its Gulf allies are reportedly running low on interceptor missiles. They also need more medium and short-range missiles to replenish those used so far against Iran and elsewhere. The White House isn't underestimating Iran's offensive capabilities.
They are producing, by some estimates, over 100 of these missiles a month.
Hence the renewed pressure on U.S. arms manufacturers. President Donald Trump is warning them that manufacturers who are deemed to be underperforming could lose their multi-million-dollar contracts, all the while insisting that the United States has plenty of weapons left. But there's another issue, the impact of this conflict on the economy. World War II established conditions for future growth and played a role in ending the Great Depression by increasing government spending and increasing employment. But the Vietnam War didn't do the same. And more recently, the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts were financed by deep deficit spending that actually hurt the economy. Depending on the duration of the current conflict, it could have a catastrophic impact on oil prices and the global economy. Not to mention the biggest cost of all, the human cost. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Washington.
The war between the United States, Israel, and Iran has seen drones deployed across the Middle East this week. And while it's the first time some countries have come under drone attack, the technology has been used on the battlefield in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And as Audrey McAlpine now reports from Kyiv, Ukrainians may have the answer for how to combat them.
The Iranian-made drones that reshaped the war in Ukraine appearing in the Gulf, evading air defenses in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, showing how this weapon is moving beyond a single conflict. Years of deployment by both Russia and Ukraine have refined the technology and driven up production.
This is a Shahed-style drone. Iran developed the design and is believed to have tens of thousands of these drones. Each one cost about $50,000 to produce, but shooting them down can be even more expensive, given that some interceptor missiles cost over $1 million. Russia regularly launches hundreds of these drones into Ukraine in a single night, which is why Ukrainians are working on cheaper ways of intercepting them.
I just think there is no country else that is more prepared for this than us and that has as much expertise as us.
Here at the Skyfall Academy, they're training Ukraine's military how to use interceptor drones, one of the ways that Ukraine is fighting against Shahed-style drones. And after 4 years of war, it's just another example of how Ukraine has become a leader in drone and anti-drone warfare.
It's just much more cost-effective and easy to deploy and really easy to do it in the mass production.
The Ukrainian government hopes solutions like these could eventually be exported to Gulf countries or even exchanged